going to evaluate what you chose to say or anything to do with the topics themselves. I'm just going to focus on how well you spoke, how well the speakers spoke in terms of technique. So the first speaker that we heard from was Megan, and we had a section on what would be her pet hate taxes, that things that annoy her that she'd love to see taxed and therefore sort of disincentivized. So I thought Megan used hand gestures very well. I haven't put down an example, so I can't remember exactly what, so I'll assume that all of her hand gestures were excellent. I thought that Megan could have spoken a bit louder when she was thinking, rather than, for example, pausing. She tended to mumble down into silence, and perhaps that a more dramatic pause might have served the purpose a little bit better. But another good point that I noticed was a nice variation in pitch. So it was a very interesting tone to listen to when she was speaking. Next, we heard from Jo, who I've not seen speak before. I'm not sure if it was her first speech. The speech was about the rioters and whether or not we wanted to give them a kick up the backside or put an arm around them and be more friendly. I thought that Jo, again, made very good use of gestures. In particular, she said that whether we might be on one side of the fence or the other, which was a very good spatial correlation, which I think we've talked about in one of our training sessions before. I thought one thing that she could have done better was the way that she stood on the stage. If I just try and demonstrate, I think that she stood with her feet very close together and quite sort of still, and perhaps she was moving up here, but her feet were very static, and if she had a stronger, wider stance, perhaps shoulder width apart, that might have helped. And the other thing I liked about Jo's speech was the wide vocabulary. We didn't have things that people had done, we had things they'd partaken in, which I thought was very good. Next, we heard from Kelly Marie about whether or not Twilight was tedious. I thought Kelly Marie's volume and diction were very good. Everything that she was saying was very clear. I thought that her hand gestures were a bit random and not necessarily correlating to what she was saying. So perhaps more selective use of hand gestures might have been better. But another thing that she did very well was keep eye contact with everybody throughout. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been staring down here and looking up at the ceiling to avoid your eyes, and she didn't. She sustained eye contact with us very well. So next we heard from Rob about all the texting teenagers. Rob did a very good demonstration of people texting in train stations and wandering all over and perhaps falling off the platform, and that was a very good sort of movement on stage that sort of grabbed our attention very well. One nitpicking point that I noticed was that I heard one or two you knows and other sort of filler phrases, which again might have been better as pauses and slowing things down. But that really is a sort of nitpicking point, and I only noticed it once while I was looking for something to correct him on. Another good thing was his use of repetition, which we've heard about as a technique. He used the 60 texts every day statistic again and again and again, and it really stuck in our minds. So that's a good technique there from Rob. Next we heard from Shane, talking about what causes internet trolls to go out and ruin the internet for everybody else. I thought Shane, rather like some of his very dramatic speeches, gave us very slow, clear delivery and really guided us through his sentences, which made them very easy to understand and listen to, and it was very pleasant to listen to. Again, a nitpicking point, I heard a filler noise in between things. I heard him say at least once. Again, if he'd swapped that in for one of his big dramatic pauses, that might have worked better. He did a very good gesture when he wanted to pause to think, which was to take his hand and rest his chin on his hand like this, which is sort of, I think there's a famous statue, in fact, in this position, and it's very, it was a very good position in which to wait and think your way through. Next, we heard from Jane on the London Olympics. I thought that Jane spoke with very good voice clarity and volume, and everything that she said was very clear. I noticed that her, like my eye contact, was moving around the room occasionally, but then jumping up and jumping down to avoid us. So perhaps more sustained eye contact is something to work towards. It is difficult. I do it wrong as well. And I also thought that her use of gestures was very good. Although, again, I've not written down a specific one that I can demonstrate. So I will assume that all of her gestures were excellent. So next we heard from Vincent, asking the question, does the high street have a future? Vincent had very good variation in the pitch of his voice. It went up and down nicely and kept our attention. One of the things that he was doing that might have been better was that he was moving side to side a little bit. I think I noticed, perhaps that will be clear on the video if he'd like to look at it. And that was a little bit distracting from what he was saying. So a firmer stance might have been better unless he was demonstrating something. But I thought that it was a good, slow, careful delivery with nice long pauses that made everything very clear and easy to listen to, so that was very good overall. We then heard from Ashley on the cost to the NHS of alcohol and alcohol-related problems. Ashley immediately drew us in with a very knowledgeable personal story. It was clear that he knows a lot about this subject, and that made him very interesting, captivating to listen to. But I thought on his hand positions, rather than being random, there were only two, and they oscillated between the two. So the first was hands together, and the second was hands out like this, and then back to hands together and hands out like this. And again, it didn't seem to point to any particular thing that Ashley was saying. So perhaps next time a more neutral position for the hands, and then specific gestures to mark specific things he was saying might have been better. But one other positive thing that Ashley did was that he had a very good start, very solid and confident, and he stood here and talked to us very relaxed and strong, and that again added to his the impression of being very knowledgeable about the subject. Next we heard from Mike about Sweden and the end of cash as we know it. He did a very good gesture when, and in fact he even had the sound effect down because he had some change in his pocket, I think, or perhaps it was another zip. But he did cash in my pockets, and he had a nice little Asda price noise, and it was very good, sort of linking in with the topic. I thought that Mike was moving a little bit, and that was a little bit distracting. I think I've got here rocking. I'm not sure whether it was rocking side to side or forwards and back. Perhaps we'll have to watch the video to find out. Another thing that he did very well was that he sustained his eye contact very well with the audience. I didn't see him avoiding us. I saw him looking around the audience regularly, so that was very good. I know I'm running over the end of the time now. I think it might normally be 10 minutes rather than 8 to evaluate the topic. So anyway, I'll keep going and go to the end. I've got six more to evaluate, so I've got to get through everybody. So we next heard from Esther on the topic of are managers overrated, particularly with relation to football. I thought Esther had very good eye contact. It was sustained with us very well. Again, I noticed sort of I nearly did it myself then and said sort of, the filler noises in between things, saying sort of and and again, I would suggest that perhaps Esther could try pausing and then going on and letting us have a break from the sort of the noise that because Esther was trying to keep talking in the gaps rather than stepping back. But it had a very good ending to the speech because we had a story about Esther's manager, and then but it's okay because he's one of us, and that was the end. And I thought that was a very good ending point.